I was planning to pursue, medicine, Canada did seem to pop up as one of the places who had the biggest opportunities, especially from a post-education work opportunity perspective as well. I did get a scholarship of $30,000, which covered one semester of my education. You, because of who you look, because of your accent, because of your nationality and your cultural backgrounds, do carry certain types of stereotypes and assumptions about yourself and about your capabilities. I remember one of the people mentioned to me, Ritika, you're from India, right? I said, yeah. They said, then how do you know how to speak in English? Right? They said, are there schools there? They told me, hey, we cannot hire you because you don't have Canadian experience. I think it's one of the best things that happened to me, to be very honest. Not only did my confidence go up, but the value that people saw in me also shifted. Hi everyone, my name is Ritika. I'm originally born and brought up here in India. I moved to Canada about 6 years ago. And when I initially moved to Canada, I wanted to always be a doctor, but then ended up finding my love for business, specifically consulting. So I ended up transitioning careers by gaining certain practical experiences by working with different startups and non-for-profits. And once I did that, I was not only able to land a job at Deloitte, but actually 4 other consulting firms, but ended up choosing Deloitte as the space to be in. So I've been working there for a year and a half now. And I work in the capacity of a human capital consultant there. As a part of that team. In addition to that, I also work as a speaker, a creator on LinkedIn as well. I have spoken at TEDx twice, and I am also the founder and the CEO of Redefine, which is a non-for-profit organization focused on empowering a lot of immigrants and newcomers. We have worked with about 30,000 people across 4 different countries in 20 regions and have a community of about 50,000 immigrants there in Canada. So the reason I chose Canada over other countries was actually, it's not a good reason, but the reason I chose is one, because when I was planning to pursue, medicine, as I mentioned before, abroad, Canada did seem to pop up as one of the places who had the biggest opportunities, especially from a post-education work opportunity perspective as well, because we all know compared to the US, Canada is a lot more liberal and free in terms of the opportunities you can pursue, whereby you can still stick in Canada for a year after graduation to get some work experience. That was one of the other one reason. The second reason was because a lot of my friends, to be honest, were going to Canada as well. And initially, when I spoke to a lot of the students, as I had mentioned, in Canada, in the US and in the UK, through their experiences, they just felt that what Canada had to offer in terms of their environment, in terms of the weather, in terms of the way the people were, the cultures, right, their openness to different cultures, was something which was a lot more aligned with what I wanted, because I wanted to go to a place where, people are very welcoming for individuals from different cultural backgrounds, etc. They see value in those individuals. So that's what then made me end up choosing Canada. So the expenses of in Canada in general, like for an education, I think it's anywhere between, for 4 years, I know a lot of people just come for 2-year programs, but for a 4-year degree, I think it's anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000, depending upon the kind of university you're going to. It could also be more than that, again, depending on the university, but I would say that's fairly that range. When it comes to living expenses, I would say it's anywhere between $1,000 to $1,500 a month. And the reason it's that much is because housing is incredibly expensive in Canada. So for a lot of you who go to educational institutions that have housing, you may not have to worry about the housing because it's a part of it sometimes, but in most cases it's not. So assume that $1,000, $1,500 on a monthly basis. I did get a scholarship of $30,000, which covered one semester of my education. So one semester is like 4 months in Canada. So yes, and in terms of the process for applying for those scholarships, trust me, your academics are not the only thing they're going to look at. In fact, if anything, even if you just have 85%, but you have done so many other things, that's what they would appreciate more than you having a 99.9% and not having anything else. So I think being able to showcase your holistic self by getting those diverse experiences and showing people that you're more than just a student and you're not just one of many but one of few is very important. Overall, if I have to also summarize my experience, I think it's one of the best things that happened to me, to be very honest. And I think the reason it is the best thing that happened to me is not because of the reasons you guys are thinking of. It's not because of, oh, the education is wonderful. No, it was because of just purely the exposure that I got, the maturity that I was able to develop in even just, to be honest, just 2 weeks after once I landed there. I realized how different I was from the Ritika who had landed about 2 weeks ago, just because of the factor that, you are alone in a foreign country. You are one of the minorities, not necessarily a majority as we all are here, right? And you, because of who you look, because of your accent, because of your nationality and your cultural backgrounds, do carry certain types of stereotypes and assumptions about yourself and about your capabilities. And there's a lot of that not just unlearning from your personal side you need to do, but there's a lot of that unwrapping you need to do to help people see the real you and see how you're not just like all the South Asians they may have met in their life before, and you're not one of their stereotypes, but you're more than just that. So, that was definitely like a part of it. And there were quite a few struggles because of that, because of how I look, because of my accent, and it may not speak to what the majority speaks to. I remember my first year of university, when we had our onboarding happening, we were put in smaller groups, and I had people from all across the world. I was the only South Asian person in that group. And I remember one of the people mentioned to me, Ritika, you're from India, right? I said, yeah. They said, then how do you know how to speak in English? Right? They said, are there schools there? I said, of course. I was like, of course there are schools there. What do you mean, right? And I said, like, in case you forgot, the Britishers colonized us, right? So we obviously know how to speak in English, right? So I think there are things like those that constantly happen. Even when you apply to job opportunities, there are those barriers you face because you come from India or because you specifically come as an immigrant, right? Like as an example would be just when you're entering the job market, for example, right? People do have a lot of assumptions about yourself and your capabilities because of where you come from, both in terms of can you actually work with Canadian employees? Can you actually work with the Canadian market? That's one assumption people draw about you because they think you may not be able to speak in an accent or in a tone which appeals or is understandable rather to a lot of the Canadian counterparts. However, that's not true, right? Because for a lot of us, when we travel abroad, we adapt, right? We adapt how we speak to really make sure it's not just about fitting in, to really make sure that we're able to not just have them understand us effectively, but also communicate things effectively. That's one. I think the other thing that is also there is, I'm sure a lot of you may relate to this, who are maybe in Canada or are planning to go there, is the Canadian experience piece. And the reason I do this with it is because it's a huge topic of discussion, I know, there in Canada, and I know a lot of governments are working towards it right now. But one of the major struggles a lot of not just international students, but experienced immigrants face when they go to Canada is that lack of Canadian experience, right? A lot of us are moving right after our 12th, right? Or some of us even go after our 10th grade, right? And unlike in North America, in India, we aren't getting experiences at that young age, right? We are not used to that because it's not as common here. However, it's very common there. So when a lot of us move there, people have that expectation that we are coming with 2 to 3 years of experience, not necessarily corporate job experience, but just experience in the first place. And a lot of us may not have that. So I think that becomes one of those challenges, which also leads to those other challenges around that lack of soft skills that we are able to showcase, right? And this is very, very evident. So I think if I'm to summarize, those were the 3 big challenges. And in terms of how I overcame those, I think it comes down to the simple idea of what I was talking about before, is just realizing your value and being able to communicate that effectively, right? When it came to experiences, I not only went and got those experiences and created those opportunities by working with startups and non-for-profits, which a lot of people don't think of because that's the non-traditional way of getting experience. But at the same time, also questioning employers at times when they told me, hey, we cannot hire you because you don't have Canadian experience, right? I would question them and ask them, can you please define Canadian experience to me? Because if you think about it, Canadian experience should just be experience that you have where you worked with Canadian colleagues in their contextual settings. And I was doing that being in a university for the last 4 years, right? Doing project work with my Canadian colleagues. So I think doing those 2 things really helped employers see my perspective at things as well, and really made them open up to having me be a part of their opportunities as well. So that was one of the ways I got access into that space. And when it comes to dealing with those anxiety and nervousness, imposter syndrome around many things, I think the simple idea to that was just putting yourself out there. I think when you start putting yourself out there, a lot of us in India thought about being humble. But I think humility is a wrong ideology. There's a fine balance between being humble versus underselling yourself. And I think a lot of us do that, which is why it furthers that imposter syndrome amongst us, right? So I think I started then actually really understanding how do I sell myself and advocate for my experiences and my skill sets. And the day I started doing that, not only did my confidence go up, but the value that people saw in me also shifted, right? I was now able to convince people about my value, not just employers, but also investors or sponsors when they were planning to invest money into our organizations, right? So I think make sure to put yourself out there, be very expressive, be confident, and leverage whatever experiences you have, because it's never less, right? If you show people yourself as half, they see 1/4, right? So remember that show yourself as that complete self you are, because people always see you half of what you are, right? So if you are confident, they will see you as that confident person who is a good fit. For anyone who's looking to get jobs in Canada, I love to talk about this topic, but I think there are 3 main things you need to do. One is please create a profile on LinkedIn. I don't know how much I can emphasize that, but that I think is the deal breaker, to be very honest, right? That is your online portfolio. That is your online space of you selling yourself and who you are. So please have an online LinkedIn profile for sure about yourself, and an effective LinkedIn profile, not the one which has no picture in it and no description or no about me section, right? Have an effective LinkedIn profile which has that high SEO in it through those relevant hashtags that you're using for those future job opportunities that you want. That's one. The second is leverage that platform. Don't just have it sitting there, right? Leverage that for creating those networking opportunities for yourself. Whether you go to in-person events, switch up that QR code, right, of your LinkedIn profile. At the end of every conversation you have with anyone, online or in person, make sure you tell people, hey, would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Would love to set up that follow-up coffee chat sometime to learn more about your experiences. So the second piece is creating that network for yourself, because in Canada or in North America overall, your network is what is your net worth. There's nothing else beyond that, right? So I think second, that is very important. Third is build your personal brand, right? Identify what is something you want people to associate with you. Whenever you leave a conversation with someone, are they just remembering you for the color of your t-shirt or for the goggles or the glasses you wore? Or are they remembering you for someone who has certain values to add, who has particular skill sets, and who has particular dreams and aspirations? You realizing that first is, I think, the first goal. And then once you've realized that, leveraging that through networking, through LinkedIn profile to create that personal brand for yourself becomes incredibly important. And if there's one last piece I have to add to that, is mainly is create that confidence in yourself, right? You all have a lot of incredible value to offer here, right? You all incredibly have the potential to get those opportunities, but I think where you lack is not being able to convey that effectively.